My fiancé cheated on me with a foreign guy during a pilgrimage. Hey guys, this is a story you won't believe. It's about betrayal, heartbreak, and the gut-wrenching discovery of something you never thought you'd have to face. So, my fiancée, Maria, and we were together for 2 years. We met at work, and it was one of those classic enemies to lovers stories. You know, those intense project meetings that somehow turned into late-night drinks and deep conversations. Maria was absolutely stunning, like seriously gorgeous. She's also incredibly smart, like a rocket scientist she actually is. But she's also super down-to-earth, funny, and outgoing. What I loved most about her was her honesty. She told me straight up that she'd been hurt in the past because she couldn't separate sex from feelings. After a few relationships where trust was an issue, Maria was the one person I felt completely safe and comfortable with. After a year together, we took the plunge and moved in. Maria moved into my apartment, and for a while, it felt like a new chapter. A fresh start, but things started to change. Maria was getting burned out from work. Every night she came home with this vacant look in her eyes, shoulders slumped like the weight of the world was on them. Her infectious smile faded, replaced by exhaustion that no amount of sleep seemed to fix. There were nights she'd just collapse on the couch, burying her face in her hands, whispering, "I don't know how much longer I can do this. This job is killing me." I tried to be there for her, offering comfort. I'd say, "We'll get through this together. You're not alone," but no matter what I said, I could feel the distance growing between us, like Maria was drifting away, lost in her stress, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I started getting scared. Deep down, I knew it wasn't just the job. Something else was changing, something beyond my control. We'd been planning a trip to Europe for the summer, something Maria was incredibly excited about. Every time we talked about it, her eyes would light up like she was holding the whole world in her hands. "I've always dreamed of exploring every corner of Europe," she'd say, her voice filled with longing and a joy that was impossible to resist. We'd spend late nights looking at maps, planning everything from the streets of Paris to the Amalfi Coast. Maria seemed to find an escape from her work stress, and I believed that trip would rekindle our love, bring us back to where we were. But then, the rug was pulled out from under us when I got a dream job offer. It was an opportunity I couldn't pass up, but it meant we had to cancel our long-awaited trip. The day I told her, the smile on Maria's face vanished, replaced by a long silence. Even though she didn't say anything, I could feel her disappointment, deep, heavy, and almost impossible to handle. "It's okay, I understand. We can go another time," she mumbled, but her voice lacked the enthusiasm it used to have. I knew she was more disappointed than she let on. The trip wasn't just a vacation, it was a dream, her only solace in a world that felt overwhelming. Now, even that was gone, and I couldn't take away her disappointment. It was then that I truly realized how far apart we were drifting. Maria was at her wits' end with work stress. She started talking about needing a real break. The exhaustion was taking its toll. One night, she came home, eyes red and strained, and said, "I need to get away. I can't keep going like this." I looked at her, my heart sinking, realizing the vibrant woman I loved was fading away. I listened, trying to understand the pain she carried every day. After a while, Maria looked up, her expression serious. She talked about an idea she'd been thinking about for a while. "What if I did a part of the Camino de Santiago pilgrimage? I'm hoping it'll help me find some balance." The words hung in the air, like a release Maria had been waiting for. "I need some time for myself to relax, to find myself," she said, her voice filled with determination but also a hint of helplessness. I understood. After all she'd been through, the work, the canceled dreams, she needed to step away from everything, even me. We had amazing memories in Santiago from a trip we took last year. I still remember the look on Maria's face as we walked through the ancient cobblestone streets, admiring the moss-covered houses. Her smile radiated in the sunlight, her eyes sparkling with joy like she'd found a part of herself there. "This is one of the places I feel most at peace," she'd said, her gaze fixed on the tranquil scenery. We'd spent the whole day wandering through the narrow streets, with no need to rush. Everything felt peaceful, like the world outside had paused just for us to enjoy that moment together. I could feel the serenity that the place brought Maria, and it made me feel like we were merging into a simple, genuine happiness. So when Maria proposed doing the Camino this time, I understood why she wanted to go back. Maybe that was the only place where she'd ever truly felt at peace. A place where everything felt simpler amidst the pressure on her shoulders. Even though I was a little nervous about her going alone, I couldn't say no. I agreed to let her go, hoping the paths leading to Santiago would help her find her lost balance, and maybe even bring us closer, like we were when we stood together under the Santiago sky. 2 weeks ago, Maria got everything in order and started her pilgrimage. At first, everything went as planned. We stayed in touch regularly, texting and video calling almost every day. Maria shared stories of the long walks through endless trails, the beauty of nature, and the peaceful space she found along the way. "This is amazing. I feel like I can breathe for the first time in months," she said, her eyes sparkling through the screen, the joy of freedom in her voice. I felt reassured, confident that what she needed was to get away and recharge. But as the days went by, I started to feel something was off. At first, it was just small details I didn't pay much attention to. Maria started responding to texts slower. Video calls became shorter and less frequent. One night, we were video calling as usual, but Maria's eyes darted away when I asked her about her day. Something had changed. I could feel the distance in her voice, the way she answered. "I just need more time to myself. Sometimes I just want to be quiet," she explained, but I couldn't help feeling there was something being hidden behind those words. The distance wasn't just geographical anymore. I felt like Maria was drifting away from me, in a way I couldn't grasp. It wasn't about finding herself anymore. It felt like she was searching for something else, or maybe someone else. A sense of unease began to consume me, but I didn't know if it was my anxiety taking over, or if my worries had a real foundation. At first, Maria told me she was seeking self-reflection, a moment of silence to think and heal. She needed to regain her balance after the stresses of life, and I respected that. But then, our conversation shifted. Maria stopped talking about the peace and reflection as much. Instead, she started sharing stories about the people she met on the Camino. "You know, I've met so many interesting people on this journey," Maria texted, her tone lighter than usual, as if her previous exhaustion had vanished. It relieved me to see her happy, but there was also this strange, uneasy feeling creeping in. She wasn't mentioning needing quiet as much anymore. Instead, Maria's mood fluctuated based on the people she met. Every time she brought them up, she seemed to light up. Then, a name started popping up more and more in our conversations, the German guy she occasionally hiked with. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maria is friendly and loves making new connections, and she'd mentioned other people she met along the Camino. But one time, she texted, "I hiked with a really friendly German guy today. He knows a lot about the history of this place." I just smiled, thinking it was a normal encounter. But then, the German guy kept showing up in subsequent stories. Maria shared how they hiked together more, stopped for lunch together, and even shared personal stories, things she might have only shared with me before. Slowly, a sense of unease started to grow in me. Every time Maria mentioned him, her voice seemed filled with excitement, her smile wider on the phone screen. I tried to tell myself it was normal, that Maria had just found a good hiking companion on her long, challenging pilgrimage, but the feeling inside me wouldn't go away. Video calls became shorter and more awkward, while stories about the German guy got longer. I started questioning if something was happening that I wasn't seeing. Maria was still Maria, but the space between us was becoming more defined. Maybe she had found something, or rather, someone, while I stood here, helplessly watching everything slip away. I've spent years in the military and intelligence, so I'm highly trained in interrogation techniques. I can instantly spot when someone's story starts to crumble, inconsistencies that a normal person might miss. So, on our calls with Maria, I couldn't help but probe a little deeper. Not because I wanted to doubt her, but because the unease wouldn't leave me. At first, I approached it subtly, asking calculated but specific questions, testing if her story aligned. They were seemingly harmless questions, but each one had a clear purpose. "Where did you hike today? Did the German guy hike with you? Where did you have lunch?" I grasped at every small detail, waiting for gaps and inconsistencies in her answers. The more I probed, the more gaps I saw in Maria's story. Sometimes she'd stumble over her words, a telltale sign I couldn't ignore. Maria never stumbled when she talked to me before. The first time I noticed it, I felt a chill run down my spine. She started using words that didn't make sense, not the way she normally expressed herself. And most importantly, whenever the German guy came up, Maria became vague, not clearly stating what they did or where they went. When I pressed for specific details, her answers were often lacking or contradicted what she'd said before. I knew Maria was hiding something. The signs were undeniable. I've been through too many interrogations to not recognize when someone is trying to deceive or conceal. Maria, who used to be so open and honest, was now building a wall between us, a wall constructed of half-truths and confusing gaps. The more she tried to hide it, the more I felt the truth slipping away, like grains of sand through my fingers, impossible to hold on to. After a few calls, I was pretty sure Maria was lying about where she was and what she was doing. Some days she'd say she was hiking alone, wanting some quiet time to reflect. But then, soon after, in another conversation, she'd casually mention the German guy as if they had spent the day together. That discrepancy was too much to ignore, and the feeling of unease grew even stronger. One evening, I decided to confront her more directly, hoping her answers would shed some light or at least help me pin down exactly what was happening. "What did you do today?" I asked softly through video chat, trying to sound normal so she wouldn't sense I was searching for something. "I walked around the village, enjoying the fresh air," Maria answered, a fleeting smile on her face, but it wasn't the smile I was used to. I could feel a hesitation in the way she responded. I pressed on, "Oh, really? So the German guy wasn't with you today?" I stared directly at the screen, trying to track Maria's reaction. Immediately, she paused for a moment, a flicker of discomfort crossing her face. It was impossible to miss. No, he was with a different group, she said, but her voice was a little shaky, unsure. I decided to push it further, probing deeper. That's weird, I thought you said you wanted some time alone. But it sounds like you saw him earlier. This time, Maria was clearly uncomfortable. She struggled to find the right words, her eyes avoiding mine. Well, I did see him briefly, just. We exchanged a few words. No big deal. I could sense the deception becoming clearer. Her answer was not only vague but contradictory to what she'd said earlier. I couldn't shake the chill down my spine as I realized she was hiding something. My unease started to turn into a simmering anger. Maria, are you sure there's nothing else you want to tell me? I asked, my voice low but laced with suspicion. I wanted her to know I was starting to see through the dishonesty in her words. Maria looked at me through the screen, silent for a few seconds, seemingly weighing her options. Then, she sighed lightly. Honey, there's nothing. I'm just tired. But I knew something had shifted, and the truth was being buried under a layer of vague excuses. What I didn't know was when and how that truth would surface. Then, yesterday, Maria texted me with a strange request, a request that made everything I'd been suspecting become crystal clear. I'm camping overnight, she wrote, and the German guy doesn't have a place to stay. I have a tent with 2 beds. Would you be okay with him staying with me? Her question was framed casually, as if it was just a normal situation, nothing to worry about. I hesitated, the feeling of unease growing even stronger inside me. Normally, if it were anyone else, I'd say no instantly, without a second thought. But Maria wasn't a stranger. She was the person I trusted completely, the one I loved, and had been with for a year. I stared at my phone, trying to make sense of the request. Was I overthinking things? Had my questioning and probing led me to see everything through a negative lens? Maria had always been straightforward and open, and I'd never had any reason to doubt her before. She'd always been honest, or at least I wanted to believe that. But then the image of the German guy popped into my head. He wasn't just a random hiking companion anymore. His name had come up so much in our conversations, and Maria's excitement whenever she mentioned him was impossible to ignore. I felt a sense of danger lurking in this request, as if it was a test of my trust, but also a sign of something I didn't want to face. Ultimately, I fought back my doubts, and I replied, yeah, sure, I trust you. I told myself it was the right thing to do. If I said no, it might make Maria feel like I didn't believe her anymore. And if the truth was that I was overreacting, then my refusal would only crack the foundation of the relationship we'd worked so hard to build. But as soon as I sent that message, I regretted it. A cold wave of doubt washed over my mind. Thoughts of what might happen in that tent, with 2 beds and 2 people who'd been growing closer, swirled in my head, making it impossible to calm down. I knew that, no matter how much I wanted to trust Maria, there were things trust couldn't fix. Maybe I'd just set myself up for the truth to reveal itself in the most painful way possible. A few hours later, in the afternoon, Maria sent me a series of pictures of the tent she was camping in. At first, I opened them with a sense of hope that I'd push away the doubts in my heart. I hoped those pictures would reassure me, help me believe I'd done the right thing by agreeing. But as the images popped up on my screen, I instantly noticed something was wrong. In the pictures, there was only 1 bed, and it wasn't 2 single beds as she'd said. It was a king-size bed, big enough for 2 people to lie comfortably. It felt like the world around me suddenly tilted. I held my phone, staring at the picture, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. But the more I looked, the more confused I became, as if I couldn't connect the events that were happening. Why was she lying about this? Why did she say there were 2 beds, then send me a picture of a king-size bed? A terrifying truth started to take shape in my mind, but I didn't want to accept it. I tried to find logical explanations. Maybe she misremembered. Maybe the tent wasn't fully set up yet. Maybe the king-size bed was just a convenience she hadn't thought much about. That evening, we had a video call. From the moment the screen lit up, I could feel something was off. Maria was acting strange. Her voice didn't sound natural. Her eyes kept darting away. She was clearly trying to conceal something, and I could feel the tension filling the space between us. That's when I shifted into interrogation mode, a skill I was thoroughly trained in during my time in the military. I knew how to stay calm, not appear suspicious, but also ask the right questions, strategically crafted to test the consistency in someone's story. How was your day? I asked casually, as if I just wanted to hear about her journey. I walked around town by myself. It was so peaceful, Maria replied, but her voice lacked the usual comfort. I could feel a hesitation in the way she answered. I kept probing, each question more specific. What time did you start walking? Did you go to any particular place? The more I inquired, the more contradictions appeared in her answers. Maria claimed she'd been alone all morning, hadn't seen anyone, but then, in a slip of the tongue, she used the word we to describe a situation where she'd previously insisted she'd been alone. That wasn't the first time this week she'd mixed up her words. Every time Maria said we, my heart would clench. I kept my composure on the outside, but on the inside, a sense of unease was rising, becoming clearer with every passing second. Finally, the conversation shifted to the topic I was waiting for. The German guy, Maria said nonchalantly. He decided to leave after realizing there was no extra bed, and I wasn't comfortable with that, but just a minute before, she claimed to have walked alone all day. I silently noted the contradiction, the words that didn't align, the details she constantly changed. Everything just added more fuel to the fire of my suspicion. I could see the anxiety in Maria's eyes as she tried to keep her story from falling apart in front of me. Not even a few minutes later, Maria made another mistake. She said she'd be hiking alone tomorrow, but then, without thinking, she let another detail slip. "Oh, they're planning to have breakfast where tomorrow morning," she blurted out, mentioning someone else, when she just claimed to be going solo. I stopped, took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. These inconsistencies weren't small details anymore. They were clear signs that Maria was hiding something from me. I knew that if I let my emotions burst forth at this point, things would go in a direction I couldn't control. But at the same time, I couldn't help but think the truth was close, and it might just crush everything we had. I decided to steer the conversation in a different direction, trying a softer approach. "How's your new tent? Do you like it?" I asked in the most normal tone I could muster, trying to create a sense of normalcy, as if the previous inconsistencies hadn't happened. Maria hesitated for a moment, her eyes glancing across the screen as if she was weighing something. Then, suddenly she changed her demeanor, shifting from her previous discomfort to a surprisingly emotional softness. Her voice became gentle and affectionate. "This trip has made me realize how much I love you," Maria said, her eyes softening as she looked at me through the screen. "I just want us to be together forever. Grow old together." Her words were filled with warmth, as if she was trying to reassure me after the previous contradictions. This sudden shift threw me off guard. Just moments before, she was stumbling over her words, her story inconsistent, but now, Maria was talking about love, about our future together, in a saccharine tone that seemed almost too good to be true. It felt like she was trying to control the conversation, diverting my attention from the red flags that had been raised. But instead of feeling reassured, my heart sank even lower. Maria's words, however sweet, couldn't erase the feeling that something had changed. I wasn't sure about the sincerity in those promises anymore. Was Maria trying to keep me close, soothe my doubts, or did she really feel that way? We ended the call shortly after that. Maria said she was tired and needed to rest after a long day of walking. I said goodbye, trying to smile through the screen, but my heart felt heavy as I hung up. As the phone went dark, the space around me felt eerily silent, leaving me with thoughts I couldn't shake. No matter how much Maria spoke about love, about our future, I couldn't shake the feeling that things weren't the same. Something was deeply wrong, and her sweetness was only making me suspect her more. My heart was filled with a mix of emotions. A part of me still wanted to believe her, but another couldn't erase the warning signs that were flashing so brightly. About an hour after the call ended, Maria sent me a video. It was a short clip, about 20 seconds long, a 360-degree shot inside the tent, from her perspective on the bed. I opened the video with a glimmer of hope that it was just a harmless clip, maybe to reassure me after our contradictory conversation. But as soon as the video started playing, my heart dropped. In a matter of seconds, I realized there were 3 things I couldn't ignore, 3 things that made my stomach twist. First, under the blanket covering Maria's legs, there was clearly an unnatural shape, as if someone was lying under the covers with her. It was blurry, but enough for me to realize it wasn't just her. Second, as she swiveled the camera around the tent, I saw a pair of shoes near the tent entrance, but they weren't Maria's. They were too big, sturdy looking, and definitely male, definitely not hers. Every little detail from before suddenly felt crystal clear. And finally, what caught my attention most was the audio. Because I was wearing headphones, every sound was crystal clear. At first, it was just soft noises, like movement inside the tent. But then, another sound hit me, making my body freeze. It was breathing, but not just Maria's. The breathing was too heavy, too steady, for just her. I could clearly distinguish that there was someone else in the tent at that moment. That second breath, the sound of someone else, silent but haunting, felt like a knife plunging into the fragile trust I had left. I sat there, staring at the screen, hearing those breaths, unable to erase the worst fear. While the visuals didn't fully match what I was hearing, the feeling in my gut had a clear answer. The man's shoes, the shape under the blanket, the sound, they were undeniable evidence. Maria wasn't alone. I sat there, my phone still in my hand, my mind blank but also flooded with emotions. Pain and disappointment washed over me. I didn't need any more explanations. I knew what had happened. All the doubts, all the signs I'd tried to dismiss over the past few weeks, now coalesced into an undeniable truth. I sat stunned, not knowing how to react. A part of me still wanted to find an excuse for her, hoping it was all a misunderstanding. But the truth was clearer than ever. Maria had betrayed my trust. And the worst part was that I'd felt it coming for a long time. I just didn't want to believe it. The video ended, but the sound of that breathing still echoed in my mind, weighing down my heart. I knew our relationship had reached a point of no return. Now, I had to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. I sat there, staring at the screen, my hand gripping the phone. A coldness washed over me, as if everything I thought I knew about our relationship had shattered before my eyes. The unavoidable truth was slowly revealing itself, each gruesome piece connecting, and I knew, from this point forward, things would never be the same. I couldn't stop thinking about that video. It haunted me, drilling into my mind, forcing me to confront what I'd been avoiding. As soon as I noticed the inconsistencies, I put the video on my laptop, determined to find a clearer answer. I started enhancing both the visuals and the audio like a detective uncovering hidden truths. I didn't want to guess anymore. I needed to know exactly what had happened. The deeper I went, the more my worst fears were confirmed. I discovered why the audio in the video was out of sync with the visuals. The audio wasn't captured from the phone, but from Maria's headphones, lying underneath the blanket. It hit me in an instant. I wasn't just seeing through that blanket. I was hearing what was actually happening beneath it. This wasn't a video Maria filmed herself while lying on the bed. It was filmed by the German guy while Maria was giving him oral sex under that blanket. My heart stopped. The scene became too clear, and there was no way to deny the brutal truth anymore. In the final second of the video, I even heard his voice complimenting her in German. Schon just that one word, short and clear yet haunting, was enough to confirm everything I'd been suspecting. I sat there, a wave of dizziness washing over me, as if the air around me had been sucked out. A bitter feeling, shame and hurt consumed me, making me realize that any illusion of love and trust had completely vanished. I had no illusions left about what actually happened in that video. The ending was too clear, too painful, and also too real. What I'd been feeling vaguely for weeks now existed with all its cruel reality. Confused and angry, I decided to send Maria a simple text. I wanted to see how she'd react. Questions and doubts swirled in my head, but I wasn't ready to say it out loud. I needed a sign from Maria, an explanation, even if it was a lie, at least a response. Not long after, she replied, "I just wanted to show you my tent, that's all," she said. A short, cold response, as if there was nothing to worry about, nothing wrong. She didn't realize, or didn't want to realize, that I'd seen and heard more than she thought. I sat there, looking at that text, feeling an even greater emptiness inside. Then, instantly, her phone went into airplane mode, something she always did when she was about to sleep. It added a layer of bitterness to the situation. Was this her habit, a way to avoid any extended conversation before bed, or to hide what she didn't want me to know? I sat there motionless, staring at my phone screen, my heart heavy with the brutal truth I'd just discovered. I knew what had happened, but I didn't know what to do next. A part of me wanted to confront Maria directly, demand a clear answer, force her to admit the truth. But another part felt like it was all pointless. I already knew, so what good was questioning or arguing anymore? I fell into a state of complete disarray. I should have been exploding, confronting the betrayal, but instead I felt trapped in a heavy silence. I didn't know what to do next, call her, text again, or just simply cut everything off. Every emotion was mixed up. Anger, hurt, and disappointment blended into an impossible mess. The clock on my phone ticked away silently, but in my heart, time seemed to stop. There felt like no way forward and no way back. She'd betrayed me, and all I was left with was the stark reality of that. It's the next day now, and I still haven't responded to any of Maria's texts. The heaviness in my heart hasn't lifted, and every time I think about what I saw in that video, I feel unable to face her. What I need right now is not a conversation, but time to think, time to truly understand what happened and what I'm going to do next. Maria keeps texting me, as if nothing had happened. The first text was a picture I took with her parents' dog, a memory she knew I loved. I looked at the picture, but there were no emotions besides emptiness. She's trying to create normalcy, as if our conversation last night or the horrifying video had never existed. Then another text came in. She'd reached Santiago. Maria sent a message announcing her completion of the pilgrimage, but her tone was a bit annoyed, clearly upset that I hadn't congratulated her. She said, "I made it, but you haven't said anything. Aren't you happy for me?" I read that text and couldn't respond. How could I congratulate her when all I could think about was that video, those images and sounds, her sweet words before, those plans and dreams about the future together, now felt like barefaced lies. I wondered if she realized what I knew. Maybe Maria was too focused on the German guy to realize she'd captured everything on video, a clip she probably thought I'd never uncover the truth behind. Or maybe she still doesn't know what's happening. She thinks I'm just busy or have other issues keeping me from responding. But my silence, now stretched out over an entire day, must be raising suspicions. I know Maria isn't stupid. She'll realize soon that something has changed. But I still wasn't ready to face her. Every time I thought about confronting Maria, asking for an explanation, or telling her directly that I knew the truth. I felt exhausted. I wasn't prepared for the storm of emotions that confrontation would surely bring. What I needed was more time, more space to figure myself out, to prepare for the confrontation I knew was inevitable. I set my phone down, looking at the space in front of me, my heart heavy with conflicting emotions. I loved Maria. There's no denying that. But that love was now tainted by betrayal. Could I forgive her? Could I continue this relationship knowing what I knew? I didn't have the answers, and maybe I wouldn't have them immediately. But until I was ready, I'd stay silent, waiting for the moment I could face the truth, no matter how painful it was. In 2 days, Maria was supposed to fly back home. She texted asking me to pick her up from the airport, and it made me even more confused. I didn't know what to do. My emotions were a tangled mess, a knot I couldn't unravel. The person I'd trusted more than anyone, the one I'd loved and shared my life with, had done something cruel and sick that I couldn't imagine. I was pretty sure I was going to end the relationship. After all I knew and had seen, there was no turning back. But even so, I didn't want to drag things out or make things complicated. The last thing I wanted was to be drawn further into this emotional roller coaster. I just wanted to get out of this situation as quickly and painlessly as possible for myself. Any form of revenge didn't matter to me at this point. All I wanted was to be free from this betrayal, and the less I had to confront Maria, the better. I didn't care about revenge or making Maria suffer. It didn't feel important anymore. The pain I used to have seemed to harden, replaced by emptiness and a determination to end things as cleanly as possible. I knew this relationship was over, and prolonging the breakup would only bring more suffering to both of us. I had nothing left to say to Maria, nothing to explain or argue about. Those feelings had died along with the trust she'd shattered. What I was considering was sending her a text, simple and to the point, saying I knew everything and didn't want to communicate anymore. I didn't need her confession. I didn't need any apologies. Confronting her directly, or even picking her up from the airport, would only make things more painful and complicated. She could ask someone else to get her belongings, and we could deal with the remaining issues through someone else. I wanted to avoid any conversation that might make me weak or give her an opportunity to explain. Everything was too clear. I wanted to end things quickly and move on with my life. I'd suffered enough, and it was time to keep going. Maria could live with her choices, and I just wanted peace. I thought about my life going forward. No more sleepless nights, no more doubts and hurt. My life would go on without Maria. However, one thing kept bothering me: Maria's parents. They were always so kind to me. I knew they loved Maria deeply, and soon, when she returned home, they'd find out we'd broken up. It made me feel incredibly uncomfortable. I wasn't sure if I should tell them everything. They'd always been supportive of our relationship, and I knew they had a strong belief in love and honesty in marriage. If I told the truth about what happened, about Maria's betrayal, it could completely shatter the image they always had of their daughter. As parents, they were so proud of her, and I didn't want to be the one to destroy that admiration. But at the same time, I couldn't bear the thought of facing their questions, their inquiries about why we broke up. If I didn't tell the truth, it meant I had to remain silent about what Maria had done, and I wasn't sure I could do that without feeling even more hurt. The hardest question was, should I reveal the truth or just simply say we weren't right for each other? Would a lie make things easier, not just for me but also for Maria's parents? The more I thought about it, the more confused I became. On one hand, I wanted to sever ties with Maria completely and leave no trace of our relationship in my life. But on the other hand, I felt weighed down by the idea of dragging innocent people like her parents into a painful story they didn't need to know. They weren't at fault for any of this, and I didn't want to inflict more pain on them than the truth could bring. 2 days passed. The time flew by faster than I expected. Maria kept sending me pictures of her journey home, beautiful scenery she'd been through. But now, those pictures didn't evoke any emotions in me. I scrolled through them as if they were just fragments of a distant memory, memories I once cherished but now held only emptiness. I went to the airport to pick up Maria, as promised. When she appeared, radiant and waving from afar, my heart felt numb. She wanted to hug me, her arms open as if nothing had happened, as if everything was still normal. I stood there, allowing her to touch me superficially, a hug I didn't reciprocate. Maria didn't sense the difference. She kept smiling, excitedly sharing stories about her trip, but I just nodded along, my gaze fixed ahead. We left the airport and went for dinner, a meal I barely tasted. Maria sat opposite me, laughing and joking, thinking maybe I was tired or stressed about work. "You seem tense. Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice gentle, but with a hint of concern in her eyes. I replied, maintaining my aloofness, "Nothing, just work is getting to me." I lied, but the words came easily, as if it was the only way I could maintain distance. Maria seemed convinced. She nodded, trying to create a lighter atmosphere, but the tension between us started to become obvious. We got back to the apartment, and I walked in like a ghost, showing no emotion. Maria still held that same enthusiasm from the airport. She was bubbly and playful, trying to get my attention, like she always did when we hadn't seen each other for a while. She climbed into my lap, her eyes looking at me with anticipation, but I gently pushed her away, not with anger, but with heavy weariness. "I'm tired, don't bother me," I said, my voice firm but not demanding. I got up, walking towards the bedroom without looking back. My steps were heavy, but not from exhaustion, but from the emptiness in my heart. Maria stood there, bewildered, like she couldn't understand what was happening. Maybe she still hadn't realized the change. I closed the bedroom door, leaving Maria behind in confusion. I heard her call my name softly from the living room, but I didn't answer. I needed space, time to think more, but deep down, I knew this wasn't just a break, this was the beginning of the end. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Images of Maria and what she did kept replaying in my mind, making it impossible to find peace. Lying in bed, I just felt empty and mentally exhausted. I knew the real confrontation was still coming, and it was the waiting that was making everything worse. After hours of restlessness, I decided to get up. I couldn't bear the feeling anymore, needed to get out, needed to talk to someone. I grabbed my phone, calling Vincent, an old friend. We hadn't seen each other in a while, but I knew he wouldn't mind if I reached out at this moment. After a few rings, Vincent picked up, his voice sleepy but alert when he heard my voice. I suggested meeting at a bar near his place, and without hesitation, Vincent agreed. I quickly threw on a jacket, preparing to leave the apartment. As I stepped out, I saw Maria standing in the kitchen, drinking water. She looked at me with surprise, asking, "Where are you going at this hour?" I tried to keep my voice normal. "I have something to do. I'll be back soon," I said without explaining further, then turned and left, leaving Maria standing there in confusion and bewilderment. I met Vincent at the bar where we used to hang out as kids. He was waiting for me with 2 drinks already set. We clinked glasses without speaking for a few minutes, but Vincent knew I had something to get off my chest. "What's up?" Vincent asked, his sharp eyes looking at me through the hazy smoke of the bar. I had nothing left to hide, so I told him everything, from the subtle hints, the horrifying video, to the gut-wrenching realization that the person I loved and trusted most had betrayed me in an unforgivable way. "It's all too clear now. I just want to end this," I said, my voice choked with a hint of bitterness. "But the worst part is, her parents' wedding anniversary is coming up. I don't know if I should tell them the truth or just stay silent and leave." Vincent listened, shaking his head and making a wry comment. "You're stuck in a mess, my friend. Honestly, she deserves the consequences. But you gotta think about her family. They don't deserve to be dragged into this. Damn, it's a tough situation." We clinked glasses again, taking more than we needed. Vincent drained his drinks with ease, and with each one he'd drop a sarcastic remark or a joke about my situation, trying to lighten the heaviness of the story. But I knew he couldn't offer any advice beyond listening. Midway through, Sarah, Vincent's wife, suddenly appeared. She stormed into the bar with a furious expression, heading straight towards us. Without saying a word, Sarah grabbed Vincent's ear, making him yelp. "You dare go out while the kid's sick at home," Sarah scolded, her eyes glaring at Vincent with irritation. Vincent just chuckled awkwardly, quickly getting up to follow her out. Before leaving, Sarah turned to me, giving a light smile and saying, "Don't drink too much, okay?" By then she dragged Vincent out, leaving me alone. I sighed, watching them leave the bar. The feeling of loneliness and conflict in my heart intensified. I reached for my last drink, watching the liquid shimmer under the dim light. Vincent had left, but the sadness remained heavy in my mind, as if nothing could soothe the emptiness inside. I got up, leaving the bar in a daze. My head was heavy, everything around me blurred and unclear. I walked along the sidewalk, my feet unsteady. On my way home, I didn't pay much attention to my surroundings, my mind still swirling with chaotic thoughts. Suddenly, a blinding glare of headlights shone straight into my face. I raised my hand to shield my eyes, but it was too late. Everything happened so fast. The scene faded, then went black. I felt my body hit something hard, but then came silence, nothing more. The next morning, Maria was watering plants on the balcony. The warm sun was shining down, but a slight worry about my cold demeanor from the night before lingered in her heart. She didn't know what had happened, but she felt something was off. Her phone suddenly buzzed. Maria looked at the screen, recognizing an unfamiliar number. She hesitated for a moment before picking up. The police officer's voice came through the other end. "Hello, are you related to Kelvin?" Maria instantly recognized that as my name. She froze, her heart pounding. "Yes, I'm his fiancée." "What happened?" Maria asked, trying to sound calm. But the worry started creeping in. The policeman's voice softened. "I'm sorry to have to inform you. He was involved in a traffic accident. His car went into the river. We recovered the vehicle, but we haven't found his body yet." Maria felt the world crumble around her. Her hand shook, the watering can fell to the ground, but she didn't notice. Everything around her seemed to blur as she struggled to process the information. No way, he can't." Maria choked out, her voice breaking. Tears started to stream down her face, impossible to hold back anymore. She rushed to her car, consumed by panic. Arriving at the scene, Maria saw police officers investigating around the river area. My car had been recovered, badly damaged. But the most painful thing was that my body hadn't been found. Maria collapsed by the riverbank, sobbing uncontrollably in despair. She couldn't believe I was gone, that everything had happened so quickly and cruelly. All that was left was a terrible void. Days passed after the accident, and Maria could barely function. The loss and pain weighed heavily on her every day, but what truly consumed her was a deep, consuming remorse. Tears flowed constantly as she thought about what she had done to me, the man she once loved, the man she had betrayed. She blamed herself, accusing herself of making unforgivable mistakes. Every night, Maria couldn't sleep, haunted by my image and our last words. She thought about the video, about Magnus, about all the moments leading up to the betrayal, and now I was gone, unable to hear her apology. The feeling of guilt suffocated her. On the third day, Maria decided she couldn't bear it any longer. She knew her silence was only adding to the pain. She had to confess, had to face the truth. She couldn't let my parents live in admiration of a man they knew she had betrayed. Maria decided to go see my parents, Mr. and Mrs. Kelvin. She knew this would be the most painful moment of her life, but she had no other choice. She had lived a lie for too long. The door to my parents' house opened, and Maria stood there, eyes red and her face drawn. My parents, still drowning in the pain of losing their son, looked at her with confusion. They invited her in, unaware that she carried a painful secret. She sat down opposite them, her heart pounding, tears welling up. She prepared herself, but this moment was still too difficult. She opened her mouth, trying to speak. "I'm sorry. I lied to Kelvin. I didn't deserve his love, and now he's gone." The words choked on tears, and Maria bowed her head, sobbing uncontrollably. My parents were shocked, their eyes shifting from confusion to grief. My mother covered her mouth, trying to keep calm but unable to hide the breakdown. My father, with a heavy expression, only uttered a few words. "What are you saying? Lied?" How he sat there stunned, his eyes filled with disappointment. Everything they thought they knew about her shattered in that instant. Maria couldn't raise her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. She briefly recounted what happened during her pilgrimage, her relationship with Magnus, the betrayal she had tried to hide. "I was wrong. I truly regret it. If I could go back, I'd never do it. I just wish I could tell him I'm sorry." My parents sat there silently, both seemingly paralyzed by what they'd just heard. My father shook his head, unable to speak, while my mother sobbed beside him. The air in the room became heavier than ever. Suddenly, a sound came from the hallway, and Maria looked up for a moment, her eyes blurred with tears. The bathroom door opened, and I walked out, bandaged but alive. Maria's eyes widened, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. She leaped to her feet, almost rushing towards me, but stopped short, covering her mouth, her whole body shaking. "Kelvin, you are alive," Maria exclaimed, her voice trembling in shock. "That's not important anymore. You just need to know that I know. I know everything." Maria, my voice, now cold and firm, reached her. Maria collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, but no one came to comfort her. My parents remained seated, silent, but the disappointment and grief were etched on their faces. The ultimate truth had been revealed, and now, all that was left was an irreversible breakdown. Just then, the front door opened again, and Maria's parents walked in, their eyes filled with disbelief. They saw Maria kneeling on the floor, and me standing silently, my eyes heavy. It turned out I'd called them right before Maria confessed. Just a few seconds outside the door, they'd heard everything. Maria looked up, her eyes meeting her parents as they walked in. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed from tears. She tried to speak, but her parents advanced towards her, their eyes full of disappointment and heaviness. Maria's father, Johannes, shook his head, his voice deep but charged with emotion. "We heard everything. Maria, your mother, and I heard clearly what you confessed," he said, his tone firm but unable to hide the pain. Maria's mother, Ingrid, also stepped closer, standing near her daughter, but her eyes held none of the indulgence Maria had hoped for. She looked at Maria, tears streaming down her face but still maintaining an incredible composure. What have you done, Maria?" she choked out, her hands trembling as she held onto her husband's arm. "We love you, but we don't know what to say." Maria couldn't say anything. She hung her head, knowing she'd lost not only my love but also her parents' trust and respect. Johannes turned to my parents, his eyes filled with regret. "We're so sorry. On behalf of my daughter, I want to apologize to you both. Maria did things that are unforgivable, and I know things are over," he said, his voice cracking, bowing deeply before my parents. My parents remained silent for a moment, but their eyes held sympathy. My father, still hurting from what had happened, walked over, placing a hand on Johannes' shoulder, softly saying, "We understand. Sometimes things happen that we can't anticipate. It's painful, but the truth must be faced eventually." Ingrid burst into tears, and my mother gently approached, embracing her in a comforting hug. sharing the pain both families were now enduring. There were no words left to say. Everything was so clear. Everyone in the room understood this was the end, a painful but necessary ending. Weeks later, I had fully recovered, both physically and mentally. Even after suffering through the pain, I eventually found peace. I was no longer haunted by the past events, replaced by a sense of relief knowing I had made it through. I moved into a small house by the beach, a place I'd always dreamed of. No longer burdened by memories of the past relationship, I started finding myself again. Mornings spent sipping coffee on the porch, listening to the ocean waves crashing, were moments I never thought I'd enjoy after everything that happened. My family had also found a sense of peace. My parents, though bearing emotional wounds, had overcome this difficult phase with the resilience I'd always admired. They didn't blame Maria or her family, they simply accepted the truth and moved on with their lives. Maria and her family had moved away after that confrontation. I heard Maria had moved to a different place, trying to rebuild her life after the mistakes she'd made. I no longer felt anger or hatred towards her. I had chosen to forgive, not for her, but for myself. Forgiving so I could move on, live a new life, free from the bonds of the past. One afternoon, as I sat by the sea, I realized that I had truly moved on. Although what happened between Maria and me was etched into my mind, it wasn't a burden anymore. I had found freedom and peace within myself, something I hadn't expected. The ending wasn't endless pain, but a new beginning. And in that moment, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun, I smiled, knowing my life had finally returned to its course. Everything, no matter how painful, had passed, and I was ready for new things, ready for a future I created for myself, a happy ending, not just because I was free from the pain, but also for finding myself in the journey.